Welcome to the TK Show with the Athletic Bay Area's Editor-in-Chief, Tim Kawakami.
Hey everybody, Tim Kawakami here, recording as usual from Kawakami Studios. Glad to be here. Glad to have on as my guest the very familiar but quite exceptional Ethan Strauss, senior writer for The Athletic. I think you're supposed to be national side, but I grab you for the Bay Area. We keep you in the Bay Area as much as possible, and people in the headquarters don't listen to what I just said. You are a national writer. Everyone knows it. Ethan Strauss. Hey, Ethan, how you doing today?
All I know is talking about the Warriors is national because that is the predominant team in the NBA right now. I am doing well. My son is a few feet away.
Yes.
I'm telling him right now, he doesn't speak English yet, but if you can just keep it down, we've got a good podcast going right here where we want to talk some sports.
Wait a minute, does he speak some other language already? We're saying you said English. I mean, Portuguese? You got Portuguese going on there?
You know, his Sanskrit is unbelievable at this juncture. So he's very impressive, but he's very contrarian, just like his dad. He didn't want to speak the language of the house.
I've just never heard somebody with a newborn baby say he hasn't speaking English yet. That's pretty.
I try to specify. I try to get granular with it.
Very nice. Well, we're definitely going to get to Warriors. Obviously, Warriors is the topic that we are not going to avoid, but I think the world also wants to know Ethan on the A's. As I always check in with Ethan. When are you going to write A's? When are you going to write A's? We have gotten you out there, and you have written a couple A's pieces. Ethan Strauss on bullpenning. We had our Julian McWilliams write yesterday that there's some tension in the clubhouse about having, the new trend of having relievers start and get your starter in maybe the second time around or, second inning. It's very untraditional, maybe some awkwardness there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What's your take on, as your long view of the situation and your hoary traditions of baseball, what do you think of bullpenning? What do you think about it with the A's?
Well, I think a few things, and that was a really interesting story by Julian. I feel as though because I'm new to baseball, I'm learning things. I wouldn't have thought it obvious that these pitchers would want to struggle through the innings and would want to get dinged up and would be so against getting taken out of the game. But apparently in this culture, they want to fight through it. They like to fight through it, and they feel as though they're not getting the chance to fight through it. Now, I understand the perspective of management because the A's are just held together with spit and bubble gum when it comes to their starting pitching staff. So it makes sense to me on a strategic level, but it seems almost like a classic Moneyball tension of perhaps the smartest efficiency play versus human nature. And so it just couldn't be more A's. I don't think that I can give a take on what should be done. I don't know enough. I would actually love your thoughts on what should be done. I just look at it as a fascinating difference in philosophy that just plays into some of the themes I've known about this team for as long as they've been known for the Moneyball approach.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say do it, but do it sparingly, right? I mean, you do it. Mm-hmm. You're not saying this is what we do. You say this is what we have to do once in a while. And that's, I think, maybe part of the issue here is it feels like, okay, we're doing it. The front office says we're doing it. The manager doesn't love it, so we're just doing it. It isn't here's exactly when we're going to do it. It will be limited, and if it doesn't work, that's the conversation I think that doesn't happen sometimes with the A's. Now they're really good; it's happening. But what's your view then? Just of, I mean, you've written a couple stories of the phenomena of the way. Let's just say it: the way the East Bay is the East Bay embracing this team? Can the East Bay embrace this team?
I don't think the East Bay is embracing this team, and the answers are probably similar to the answers you get whenever I ask, which is the trade. They trade away whatever you love, and maybe they had to do it because they're cheap, but that doesn't exactly endear you to fans, especially when the team 100 feet away is one of the most glamorous teams in pro sports. This idea that, well, we can't spend money, so therefore we have to offload people immediately. And it again goes to the example of what is most efficient in the smart play versus human nature and some of the unintended consequences of actions, right? Where this might have been the smart way to do it, to sell off these guys before they get a little bit older. But there's the reality of what fans are emotionally connected to. Now, I think fans should buy in. I think this is a core for this team that's young and on the rise, and I don't anticipate them selling them off for spare parts anytime soon. And they're exciting. More to the point, they're just a good time to watch. I enjoy it. And you got guys like Laureano coming out of nowhere. And now whenever the ball is hit to center field, I'm excited. I'm tuned into the game. I did not even know who this person was earlier in the season, and he's just been a shot in the arm. And obviously, Matt Chapman is one of the most exciting players to watch in baseball, I would say. I mean, is that going too far?
No.
I don't. Yeah, he's got just an incredible charisma to the point where, his work at the plate, I think, is underrated because the defense is so commanding and captivating at third. And really, I don't even know we're calling it at third. That guy, when they shift over, is effectively playing the entire left side of the infield, and that crazy amount of foul territory to the left of the bag. So I just think that fans should give them a chance. I understand if they don't believe in them as a long-term product, but there's nothing wrong with turning a baseball game on and watching a team that will captivate your interest for at least right now. And I think I would guess for the next few years.
This is what I like about the way you look at things. It seems to crystallize a lot of things that maybe are floating around in the air. And this is the way the NBA markets itself. Like, wow, I just got to watch Steph Curry, right? I just had a terrible game in Detroit. Steph Curry's got the ball. I'm watching the game. This is the way they've marketed Iverson. Go down the line. It's the uniqueness of their great players. And you've zeroed in on Laureano. Obviously, some incredible plays he's made. Maybe even once a game practically these days. And Chapman. And I just think that's a great way to this. I don't know why baseball doesn't do more of this.
Well, I have a theory. I have a theory, and I wrote about it a little bit. Chris Davis hit this just absolute bomb that dinged off a vacant luxury box, and then Piscotty hit a long home run, and StatCast said Piscotty's home run went farther, and just by a little bit. And so Chris Davis was asked about that after the game. Now, these are NBA players. I know what the banter is going to be. If you ask Steph whose shot is prettier, yours or Clay, Steph will go, "Oh, it's my shot for sure," and he'll joke around with it. These were guys with an NBA mentality. Chris Davis would say, "No, StatCast is crazy. They've got to fix that." And everybody would have a good laugh. But instead, Davis got a little uncomfortable, and he said, I don't keep score. And then he chided the reporter after the scrum dispersed, and he said, "Don't keep score, bro. Come on." And it's this idea of don't puff your chest out. And I think some of that comes from the old-timey baseball traditions, but it's also because baseball is such a cruel sport where you fail most of the time that there's a big fear about promoting yourself because then you'll enter into a nasty slump. And I think that helps prevent baseball players from perhaps marketing themselves, and it makes them keep their head down. And maybe that's good for keeping the team dynamic, whatever you want it to be, but it's not necessarily the best for promoting the sport.
Yep. All right. Now let's get to the Warriors. People are knocking me in the head saying, "Let's talk Warriors." You got Ethan on. I will follow those commands. Let's go to the story. We haven't been able to really talk about the story you wrote. Fascinating story about how Joe Lacob bought the Warriors and kind of the mysteries involved. And Larry Ellison, I thought Larry Ellison was going to get him. You figure one of the 10 richest guys in the world is trying to buy the team, he's going to get it. But from it, you kind of revealed that it wasn't a true auction. It was kind of a inside play. From this, well, first of all, how did you start on this? And what was the biggest surprise in your mind as you went through the reporting on it?
This sounds, I don't know if this sounds hippy-dippy or what. I sometimes work backwards from what am I interested in, and if I'm interested in something, then the reader will be interested in it. And I thought to myself, I don't know why this happened. I've always wondered how this happened. It doesn't make sense to me. It's never made sense to me. I think maybe if we talked about it a little further, it would have made a little more sense because I think you had some insights on it. And so I thought about it that day, the day of the championship parade, and I think we talked about it, and you said, to your credit, go for it. I love it. Let's do it. And so that made me feel emboldened to go after it. And I couldn't have anticipated that I would learn what to me made the story really interesting, which is that it was this inside play. that it effectively was a scenario where Joe Lacob would have lost if it was just a straight up auction, but he was smart enough and aggressive enough to identify that he could head off the auction, and he flew out to Baltimore to where Chris Coham was, and face to face made his pitch and said, look, if this auction goes back and forth, I will lose. So I'm not going to engage in this auction, and I will drop out, and it won't go back and forth, and it won't get up to a number you want. Or I can give you $450 million. You tell me I have it. We cut Ellison out of the deal. And that is the play that won. It was more complicated than all that. To me, there are a lot of fascinating details about how these things go down, how in some cases they are sold out of an office that employs only 8 people, this little boutique office run by a guy named Sal Galadiotto, who was quite upset when I reported on how he ran an auction that wasn't on the up and up, but that is another story.
Have you heard from Sal, by the way? Have you heard anything from Sal since the story?
I did not hear anything from Sal since the story went up. Okay. You know, he was telling me that it was untrue that this Baltimore thing happened. The problem is that all the principals involved I could get a hold of said that it did happen and didn't have much reason to lie. And I think with Joe, Joe likes people knowing this story. Maybe Sal Galadiotto doesn't want people knowing the story, but for Joe, this is one of the great underdog coups of his life. So, of course, he would talk freely and openly about it. And I think he really made the story. I think going to Las Vegas right before the Board of Governors meeting in the Wynn Casino at Summer League and talking to Joe, Joe really made that story pop. And I love that stuff. I love just big-time capitalism and its nexus with sports, and those battles are always of interest to me, so it was a fun story to do, and I'm glad people seem to like it.
Do you think Joe went into it wanting to tell you the story, or did you kind of hit up a few buttons that got him to tell the story?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think he probably was inclined towards talking about it since he agreed to do it in the first place. But I also think that he could tell that I was interested in it, and we talked for over an hour, and we got to it later in the conversation. So maybe he got a little comfortable, and maybe he decided, okay, this is going to be the kind of story that will portray this. He might have been a little confused as to where I was going with it before, but he seemed to think, okay, this is going to be the portrayal. And I don't know if he likes or dislikes how I portray him. Mm-hmm. I do portray him a little bit like Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood, just this absolute sort of psychotic capitalist.
He does not mind that, Ethan. I can tell you this. He does not mind that.
I think that's the case. So for me, he's a fun guy to write about because I consider him such a character. And if I write about him honestly in a way where I'm not trying to make him look like a saint, he oddly likes that. So it's just easy. It's easier than writing honestly about people who want to be portrayed in a certain cuddly way. I would say that much.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, without getting too gushy here, but it's symbolic of the way he's run this team, the way, they've kind of jumped the line. He jumped past Larry freaking Ellison. He's jumped past a bunch of basketball teams in the order, the ordering of the league to the number one slot. I mean, am I being too generalized and say that there's some ties here to how the Warriors pulled off their rise to this, whatever we're going to call this, I'll call it a dynasty, from Joe Lacob? Again, really rich guy, but certainly not near the wherewithal. Him plus Goober, still not near the wherewithal Larry Ellison. Do you see some, kind of string there that ties us all together?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think that his energy and his ambition, that doesn't mean every decision he makes is a great decision, but I think it's important from the top to have that energy and that ambition and that leadership. And sometimes a negative example is instructive, right? Where last night I learned something about the value of a catcher's defense from watching Gary Sanchez just completely make that game unwinnable for the Yankees. There was no way. If your catcher plays defense like that, you can't win. You can't win it. You can't win the game if he goes out and he plays like that. And that gave me a new appreciation for the importance of a guy behind the plate who will catch the damn ball. And I feel that way with having seen the Warriors in Cohan, where if there's an absolute cipher at the top, just a vacuum of leadership, it is completely impossible. And to me, that put the change in Lacob into some stark relief. That, okay, Lacob, he might not be perfect, he might be boastful, but he's there and he's a presence and he wants to move forward, and that helps everybody else fall in line, and that is crucial for an NBA team.
And part of it is he doesn't mind arguing. He doesn't mind other personalities in that room bouncing into him. Maybe he and Jerry West bumped into each other a few too many times. But what do you get of his relationship with Bob? I mean, I've written this. I'm sure you've written. I mean, it's Meyer's team now on the basketball operations front. Do you sense that relationship has evolved, and where do you think it exists now?
I think he trusts Myers and he's delighted with what Myers has done, but he puts a ton of pressure on Myers. And that isn't anything that Myers has told me. I just remember, I remember in the DeMarcus Cousins press conference where somebody talked about the future and how it's a rental, and asked Myers about that. And I wouldn't say that Bob flew off the handle, but he was clearly annoyed. And he started going on about how he was sick of hearing about the future. Can't we just enjoy this present or focus on the present, and blah, 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 blah. And I was wondering, why is he so reactive to this? And then I look at the story that I'm writing about Lacob and about Ellison, and all Joe talks about is forward, forward, forward. I don't care about what just happened. All I care about is the future. And I went, oh, okay. He's hearing this all the time. Yep. This is why.
He was answering another question in his own head, not the one that was being asked in the press conference.
He almost lost himself in Freudian slip and called the reporter Joe. So I think that it's a relationship that's likely evolved where Joe is happy with the results, but I also think that he puts a ton of constant pressure on Bob. And for the sake of Bob's sanity, not that Joe Lacob would listen to me, I would say just ease up on Bob a little bit. Maybe give him a 2-week vacation mid-season. Just make sure Bob's in a good headspace.
Where do you think for the 14,000th time that we'll talk about this, and probably leading towards 1 billion times, Kevin Durant signs for 1 year again? I believe this July is the first serious time that the Warriors could lose him after he signed 1-year deal 2 years ago, 1-year deal this year. Now, this time going into his third season, it could be.
I think that just got aggregated, Tim. I think that just got aggregated. You say that.
If we don't get aggregated at least once, what the hell? I mean, come on, it's a failed podcast. Where are you on Durant? Where are you on Durant's and the Warriors? And you think this season can get awkward at all?
Yeah, I think it could get awkward. If I had to bet on it, I would bet on Durant wanting to play in the new Chase Center and just seeing what that's like, because ultimately this whole play has been trying to become the king of San Francisco in a way. So that would be my guess. But yeah, I think the Knicks are a serious threat. I do. I think that's something where there are certain machinations that could lead him over there. And so it is a serious threat. And ultimately, I feel as though this is just the situation they signed on for, where he hangs over the franchise like the sword of Damocles that could always fall. And it's been worth it. They've won 2 championships, 2 out of 2, so they just sign on for it. But I don't think it's the most comfortable, old school Tim Duncan, San Antonio Spurs-esque, stable environment. I do think it's a little rickety. I do think it can get a little bit shaky. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in a season where they might not get full effort. They might be a little bit tired. That is the precedent, I believe, with these teams that have been to so many finals in a row. So I do think that there could be some awkwardness resulting from the leverage that Durant has when he gets cranky and the specter of that he could flee.
Do they need Kevin Durant to win a championship?
They don't need him, but they go from another contender to perhaps favored against the field. I don't know. I don't know. Nate Duncan was telling me that he wouldn't favor them against the field this season. I disagree. I would favor them against the field.
With him, you're saying, or without him?
Oh, with him.
Yep.
With him. Without him, no. Some of it depends on their odds would be much better if he goes to New York versus if he goes, if he goes back to OKC. I don't even know how that could happen salary cap wise. And he goes to a Western Conference team. I think that would influence the odds. It would be hard. You would need to know all the different teams and how they're doing. But I still think that they would be at the top of contention if he left, even though that would put them in a tough spot as far as adding talent is concerned, because they're pretty capped out. So I think they'd still be a contender without him, but it wouldn't be like what they are now, which is I believe they should be favored against the field. And additionally, with him, I think they should be favored against the field this season, even if there's a little bit of drop-off, because I don't trust first-time finals teams. I just don't. And that's what you're going to get out of the East. So if you believe that the Warriors are going to advance out of the West, not a given, but if you believe they're going to advance out of the West, I think you should also believe with a lot of confidence that they're going to win the championship, because first-time finals teams against experienced finals teams usually works in favor of the experienced finals team. And I think the last time it didn't was probably 2004 with the Pistons versus the Lakers.
Yeah, I'm surprised Nate would say he doesn't favor them against the field. I mean, we're not trying to go, over odds here, but I don't know who you would, you start adding up the other teams. I don't get a number in my head that says that all those other teams should be even up or even better odds than the Warriors.
I think Nate's perspective might be more about the talent out east, that likely the finals team that comes that gets in there will be better talent-wise and will be a better team than last year's Cavs team, which it was just amazing that they even got there. And then with him on that, I'm just going with a more subjective reading of history that the finals are a different animal, and they screw up all your routines. They screw up when you do practice. The NBA takes over.
Yep.
You don't have control over these things, and it does impact these teams, and it makes them worse. And so I would rely on that factor. But I think that is the difference of opinion. That's
no question. And Nate knows a ton of basketball, and I'm just saying I'm surprised just because you asked the Warriors, not this is the way to do it. You asked the Warriors coaching staff, you got a team with LeBron James on it to play in the finals, regardless of who his teammates are almost, and you have another team, who do you want to go against? Blind pick. They'll say, give us the blind pick. Just get us away from LeBron. That guy put 50 on him in game one. Should have won that game. There's nobody in the East, with the possible exception of Giannis, and Giannis isn't getting to the final. So I don't, I agree with you there. Let's end the Bash Nate Duncan segment here, if we possibly can. You got any questions about this roster? You think DeMarcus Cousins is a question? Is it just kind of a write-off? What are your thoughts about what they've done this offseason and how they go into the regular season?
I think they made the move that they were delighted to make. That's not a guarantee that it will work out. Obviously, with DeMarcus Cousins, there could be some downside, but if you can't trust Cousins, maybe you can trust the incentives. He is highly incentivized to try his hardest to be a good citizen on this team. About as incentivized as one could be. It seems as though the gap in what he can get going forward based on performance is huge. If he flames out with the Warriors, he might be looking at something near minimum. If he does incredibly well, then he could be making the max. It really is that big of a swing. So that's something that coaches and personnel people obsess over, as far as how incentivized is this guy, and fans maybe less so, but personnel people definitely think in that way. So with Cousins, I think the incentives are right, and I think the Warriors are delighted, and Steve Kerr is delighted, because so many teams have adopted the switching strategy against them, and Cousins can just take a sledgehammer to that strategy. And, you want to switch on Steph? Well, now you have a point guard trying to contain DeMarcus Cousins down low. So if I had to guess, I think it will work out pretty well based on the incentives. And, of course, that's no guarantee. Probability isn't inevitability. But I would say probability is in favor of this being a good move for the Warriors.
All right, we got a few more minutes. I got to ask you, you came to the Athletic from an interesting place and at an interesting time. I mean, you watched the launch, knowing several of us very well, knowing the Bay Area very well, knowing the Warriors very well, and you joined in the middle of May, right at the start of the Western Conference Finals, which turned out to
I'll never live this down, will I?
No. I'm not even asking about that. I mean, I'm more curious about how we looked from afar and how it's been since you've been here. We are a conversation piece. New York Times writes stupid articles about us, if you ask me. Other places do what they do. How has like the perception met the reality of what you thought it was going to be like, or thing? You can say whatever you want to say. I don't care about.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk Kaepernick, but
We're not.
that's another story.
No, I've honored that. Others people might not want me to, but I've been good about that,
okay.
haven't I? I've been good about that. Other than having lived through it, I've been good about that.
So to answer your question, and I will sound like a company man, I've had a great time working here, and I've been able to do something like the aforementioned Larry Ellison, Joe Lacob article. I don't think necessarily at my former place of employ. It's not an insult, but they're more focused on what is big right now. What is everybody talking about? What did one player say about another player? And there's always kind of fodder and a news cycle and everything else. And I don't think that's what I'm good at. Insofar as I'm good at anything, I don't think that that's what my skill set is. I like to write an article about something of interest to fans, and I want to try to report and find new information for them that they can use and frame things for them. And I've been able to do that. And it was a great experience coming in May, and we were all. I do think that the subscription model incentivizes hard work. I couldn't help but notice that after these games in the playoffs, I would look in the empty media room and I would see you, and I would see Slater, and I would see Marcus, and we were the only people there at that point. And I can't help but think that has something to do with the idea that you can't just put out some BS. You need to get people to actually pay for the product. You can't just go through the motions. You need to give your best when doing this. And that's been a lot of fun for me, even if it's been some hard work. I've enjoyed that journey. So I don't know about all the meta stuff. I don't know about my instinct would be that if people are analyzing The Athletic and questioning what the model is, none of that would be going on if we were doing poorly, if we weren't making some noise. So I think it's all for the good, and it's better to be written about than not written at all. And I know I sound like a company man, but I can't help it. This is how I honestly feel. So there you go.
When there will be a anonymous op-ed piece written by someone who drops in Nietzsche a few times.
I can't do it. My idioms will give me away.
Ayn Rand will appear in there somewhere or something.
No, that's a Joe Lacob. That's a Joe Lacob op-ed with Ayn Rand. But no, it is funny because that op-ed that people are talking about from the Trump administration official. Everyone's teasing upon how they use Lodestar, and I was thinking to myself, I use Lodestar all the time.
Oh,
that's a normal term to use.
Now we're finding out some things. Now, okay, let's talk about the Kaepernick story. No, if you want to, do you want to explain the Kaepernick thing? What happened there? I have no problem if you do.
Oh, the article.
Yeah.
I wrote an article for us, and then it turned out legally that maybe I couldn't do that for my non-compete. And that was more about the television ratings and the conversation about Kaepernick. And now it's given way to this current situation with the Nike ad.
Yep.
And I'm just fascinated by it. I'm not an emotionally invested party, but it is very interesting to me that we now have a test run of the possibly apocryphal Michael Jordan quote, "The Republicans buy sneakers too." We're about to find out if they do. I mean, that is quite interesting to me.
Ethan, by the way, can I assign you story live on a podcast? Go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and write that one.
Write that one?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah, comparing it to Michael Jordan.
Yeah. You want me to stick that twig into the hornet's nest? I see.
You know what? You can do it in your normal, amiable way and not get everybody mad.
Yeah.
Go if you want to write that one, write that one.
But I am interested. I do want to look at what the polling data. I don't know how we're going to judge this. I think, as you were pointing out, it is folly to just look at the stock price on a day-to-day level and come to your conclusions about whether this is working out or not for Nike, because the stock price could be influenced by so many different factors. I mean, the president of the United States has control over tariff power, and he can be a little erratic, and he can maybe wake up and go, okay, there are some tariffs that influence Nike and their stock price plummet. So I don't think that's the way to judge whether this works for them. But I am interested in them going all in on Kaepernick and what the reactions and what the response might be, just in terms of that nerdy big forced capitalism. Plus, I like politics. I like reading about history, and Nixonland is one of my favorite books. So I'm very interested in how that's all going to play out. What's more confusing to me, actually, Tim, is that other people are so interested.
Yep.
That everybody it seems as though there are people on both sides of this who are just watching the Nike stock price in order to feel some sort of validation. And that's crazy to me. We're not Nike shareholders.
Yep.
What are we doing?
Yes. It is fascinating to me. That's why I jumped in there. Like, I have stocks, guys. You can't do it like this. I guarantee you, this is not how you do it, because I have them and I look at them more than once a day. This is not how value is established. It is not. I can guarantee you. I have a lot of stock in a certain company that rhymes with Macebook. And you can't do it like this. There's an inherent value to these things. They rise on more powerful things than somebody tweeting or some commercial, and you can't do it like this. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think somebody like a Clay Travis could be right in his thesis that this has more of a backlash or a downside than we might assume in our particular bubble. But the issue is he literally wrote a book called Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, and now the entire thesis of his book is on trial right now. So it is hard to depend on him as an objective arbiter of what's happening currently, I would say.
That might not be a terrible conclusion there on that one. It's all right. We all have our biases. We all have what we believe. That's all. Everything's fair game for some of this. Hey, I'm taking you too long. I don't want to screw up your feeding schedule here. Very carefully plotted out.
Oh, he fell asleep.
Okay,
he already finds his father tremendously boring. So,
Ethan, what's your favorite restaurant?
Okay, it's hard to get a seat because it's a little small, but I love it, and the exclusivity makes me love it all the more. Bilotti in Oakland is the best Italian food I've had in the East Bay. They make their pasta by hand. They have a truffle spinach, which might not sound too appealing, but it actually is fantastic. Appetizer. I've gone with Nate Duncan before, the aforementioned Nate Duncan. And Nate, since he's 1,000,000 feet tall, just ordered so many pastas, far more than my metabolism can handle. But Bilotti is my favorite restaurant right now in the Bay Area.
Excellent. Way to go, Ethan. All right, Ethan, we could talk forever. We often do, but very glad to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
All right, that's the show for today, everybody. Thanks.